Good morning. How are you all? What have we been talking about? I need another hand. Vasily and Seraphim, I know that you know. What have we been talking about? The cross, and before that, what were we talking about? I need another hand. Someone else has been listening. The birth of Mary, yes. Does anybody remember what are the dates? September 8th is the birth of the Virgin Mary. What's the elevation of the cross? Who remembers? Kala. Uh-oh. 10 less. Nope. September 14th. Thank you, Vasilia. Right? Good. So, September 14th is the elevation of the cross. So, September 8th and September 14th. It's not quite fair. Two major feasts within a week of each other. It's a lot of work for me. But do you hear me complaining? No. I never complain, only to Presbytera. Presbytera hears me complain. Sometimes. The third feast we have to talk about is in what month? November. We don't have a feast in October. You notice that? There's a feast in every month except for October and July. They don't get big feasts. It's interesting. But in August we have two, and in September we have two, and now I'm going off on rabbit trails. Anyway. So, in November we have another feast. Is it a feast of the Lord or a feast of the Mother of God? Does anybody know what it is? You had a 50-50 chance and you lost. A feast of the Virgin Mary. Yes, by process of elimination it must be. It's on the 21st of November. So, November 21, right before Thanksgiving. And it is the feast of the entrance of the Virgin Mary into the temple. Do you know this story? Who knows this story? Who doesn't know this story? Okay, you need more information. I've got a lot of news about this story. So, when the Virgin Mary was 3, who's 3? I need to see who. You're not 3. Who's about 3? Luke, are you 3? Good. So when the Virgin Mary was your age, her parents were old. They were like Yaya and Papu, and they knew that they weren't going to be there for the whole 20 years. And they'd promised, because she was a miracle child, that they would dedicate her to the temple. So they brought her to the temple. They brought her to the doors of the church. So those big, huge doors, you know those doors. Well, the doors at the temple in Jerusalem were 3 times as big. Big doors. And it was up on a hill, so there was steps going down. It was a very impressive building. And the little Virgin Mary, 3 years old, your age, Luke, she walked up those stairs and she looked up at this big, huge building, at these tall steps, and at these big, big doors. And what do you think she did? You think she was nervous? You think she was afraid? You think she hugged her mommy and said, I don't want to go up there, that's too big? She didn't. This is what's called a rhetorical question. I don't want an answer. I'm going to give you the answer. I'm sorry, I should have told you. So I did. The Virgin Mary wasn't scared. She walked up those steps like she knew exactly where she was going. Just up and up and up. I'm guessing she had to crawl up some of them because, Luke, do you sometimes have to crawl up steps? If they're big? Nah, you're a big boy. You can step right up. But maybe they were bigger steps than that because they're intended to be impressive. But up she goes. No fear, no nervousness, as though she has an angel holding her by the hand and leading her right inside the temple. And then an even bigger miracle happened, because she kept going She got inside and she walked down the aisle all the way to the front. And the high priest was amazed. And some of the priests started to move to grab her, and he said, watch, wait, something is happening. And she kept walking up the steps and towards the holy place and through the doors and into the place where there had used to be the Ark of the Covenant, but it was gone because of the invasions and all of the conquests and so forth that had happened before. And Panagia, 3 years old, your age, Luke, she went right inside and she sat down where the Agia Trapeza would be, where the Ark of the Covenant had been, in the holy place. And everyone was amazed. And I'll tell you why. I talked about this actually a little while ago. You remember the bishop's vestments? How they have bells? You know why the bishop's vestments have bells? Anybody remember? What happened? Why did they have bells? Do you know the whole story fast? Because otherwise I'll tell. Right. The high priest had the job of going inside the Holy of Holies, where Panagia went 3 years old without any fear. The high priest had the job of going in once a year, because people only went in there once a year to offer blood for the sacrifice, for the sins of all the people. He would sprinkle the blood of the animal that had been killed all around the inside. And because it was a holy place, he went in with fear and trembling, knowing that if he was a sinful man, God might strike him dead. And that's why he had bells on his vestments and a rope around his foot, so that if the bells stopped, they would know outside that he was dead, and they could pull him out and make a new high priest and send him in and see if he did any better. But the Virgin Mary, she went in 3 years old. She sat there as though she belonged there. And they say in the sermons of the fathers of the church that it was the Archangel Gabriel, who we celebrate today, who led her inside invisibly, showing her that this was her place. Now, what in the world does all of this mean? Okay. What was the Virgin Mary going to have happen to her a few years down the road? Who wants to? Seraphim? But before that, what's in the icon? Archangelos Gabriel que Panagia Evangelismos. I know. What's going to happen? Seraphim? Not Seraphim, Vasily. Before that, Vasily, what's going to happen? Gabriel will visit, and she will become pregnant with the Lord. Now, what do we call something that contains God? Holy. But specifically? A vessel, but more than that, a specific kind of vessel. Where do you go to worship God? Church, which is also a temple. So the Virgin Mary, inside the altar, 3 years old, she is preparing to become the temple of the Most High God, the church, because God will be inside of her. So she's sitting there in the place where the Ark of the Covenant, which had been the Ark of the presence of God, with all the miracles inside, it was gone. But we have her there instead, the real Ark of the Covenant, the one who is going to give birth to God. She's there inside, waiting. So that's interesting all by itself. And if you look up in the icons, you see the Ark of the Covenant there, and it has the icon of Panagia on it to show what it's going to be when it's going into the temple the first time. And over here you have Well, that's a different story, so never mind about that. So all of that is interesting. So far we have trivia. What about us? What are we? St. Paul says, you are the temple of the Most High God, for the Holy Spirit dwells in you, and that temple is called to be holy. So it's not just the Virgin Mary. She's the one that's special. She goes inside the altar, and she sits there where no one else was allowed to sit. But all of us are called to become the temple of God, because he enters inside of us. How does he enter into us? How does he enter into us, Vasily? In Holy Communion, the Lord enters into us, and we become the temple of God. So we're all like the Virgin Mary. We're all supposed to imitate her. Now, there's more that we can talk about, and we'll go on it further, because it's kind of a funny thing. The only person to ever be allowed to go inside the altar without a rope and bells, and it's a girl? But we'll talk about that next week, because it's important. For now, remember, you're supposed to be a temple of God, and this is why we take communion. Let's stand up and let's take communion.